When I woke up, my front door was wide open. A muddy footprint led straight to my bedroom mirror, where a message was written in red. It stopped at one word. Midney. I thought it was unfinished, until I realized midnight was only minutes away and someone was coming back. Before we start the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss future stories like this one. I woke up with a strange heaviness in my chest. My name is Nora Bennett, and that night I couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. The house was wrapped in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't let you breathe easy. I pushed away the blanket and walked into the hallway, only to stop dead in my tracks. The front door stood wide open, rocking gently on its hinges. My heart jumped. I never left doors open, not in this old house. At first, I thought maybe I had forgotten to lock it, but then I saw it on the floor. A muddy footprint, large and heavy, pressed into the wood. I bent down, staring at it, and the dirt smelled damp, like it had been carried from outside only moments ago. My breath felt short as I followed the trail. Step after step, the muddy prints carried me through the living room and past the kitchen, each mark pulling me deeper into fear. They stopped at the very place I had hoped they wouldn't, my bedroom. Inside, the mirror that once belonged to my grandmother leaned against the wall. I froze when I saw the words scrawled across the glass, written in thick, dark strokes. I'll come back at midnight. The sentence ended halfway, as though someone had been cut off, or maybe they wanted me to finish it in my head. My reflection stared back at me, pale and shaking, and the thought chilled me more than the cold air. Whoever had written that message had been in my room, close enough to touch the mirror where I stood every night, and if those words were true, they planned to return. My hands trembled as I stepped back from the mirror, my mind racing through possibilities. The old grandfather clock in the hallway ticked so loud it felt like a warning, each second pulling me closer to midnight. I wanted to believe it was some sick prank, but the footprint was real, and the words on the mirror were no trick of the light. I grabbed my phone and dialed Gregory Hale, the neighbor who lived 2 houses down. Gregory was in his 60s. A retired security guard with a habit of checking on everyone's business. He picked up on the second ring, his voice groggy. "Nora, do you know what time it is?" I swallowed hard. "Greg, my front door was open. There are muddy footprints leading inside, and someone wrote on my mirror. I don't know what to do." There was silence for a beat, then his tone sharpened. "Don't touch anything, I'll come over right now." I hesitated. Gregory had always been kind, but sometimes his watchful eyes felt too curious. The idea of him walking into my house in the middle of the night didn't ease me. It made me wonder if he already knew too much. Before he could arrive, I texted Rowan Carter, the handyman who had changed the locks last week. He never replied right away, but I needed to know if he'd noticed anything strange while working here. A minute later, 3 dots appeared on my screen. Then his message. "Are you sure you locked it? That old latch sticks." I stared at the text, my chest tightening. I knew I had locked it. Just then, my phone buzzed again, this time a message from Daniel Wright, my ex. "I drove by earlier. Your lights were still on. We need to talk." The coincidence cut through me like a knife. Why had Daniel been near my house at that hour? And why was he waiting until now to tell me? My heart raced as I realized the truth. Whoever left that message on the mirror could be someone I already knew, someone who wanted me terrified before midnight struck. I couldn't sit still. The message on the mirror stared at me like it was breathing down my neck. I grabbed the small lamp from my bedside table and crouched down to study the footprints more closely. The mud was thick, the kind that came from the old rail yard at the edge of town. My grandmother used to warn me about that place. Red clay that stuck to boots like glue. Whoever came inside hadn't just walked across the street. They came from far enough to track that specific mud. I bent closer and noticed something strange. One of the prints had a sharp chip in the heel, shaped like a small triangle. My stomach tightened as the memory rushed back. When I was helping Rowan Carter fix the back porch last week, I noticed his work boots had a chunk missing in the heel. At the time, it seemed harmless. Now, looking at the mark pressed into my floorboards, it didn't feel harmless at all. Before I could think more, there was a heavy knock at the door. I jumped, nearly dropping the lamp. My phone buzzed at the same time with a text from Gregory. I'm outside. I crept toward the front door, my heart hammering. Through the glass, I could see Gregory standing on the porch, his figure lit by the yellow glow of his flashlight. He looked uneasy, shifting from one foot to the other. For a second, I wondered if I could trust him. I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. He leaned close, his voice low. Nora, I walked around before I knocked. There's no sign of anyone outside now, but your back gate was open. I froze. The back gate was always shut tight with a heavy latch. If it was open now, it meant someone had slipped in, and maybe they weren't gone at all. Gregory motioned for me to grab a jacket and follow him, his flashlight beam cutting across the narrow hallway as we stepped into the backyard. The night air was colder than I expected, and every sound, the rustle of branches, the crunch of gravel, felt magnified. My grandmother's hydrangea bushes swayed gently, shadows stretching long across the yard. When we reached the back gate, I saw it swinging wide, the heavy latch undone as though it had been lifted carefully, not broken. Gregory crouched and ran his hand along the wood. No force, he muttered. Whoever opened this knew how to be quiet. His tone carried a weight that told me he'd seen things like this before. My eyes drifted to the ground near the gate. Another footprint. This one fresher, the mud still wet, pressed deep into the earth. And beside it, half hidden under the bushes, something metallic caught the light. I bent down and pulled it free. A small brass key, dull with age, but still solid in my palm. I turned it over, my throat tightening. On the back, faintly scratched, were the letters M.B., my mother's initials, Margaret Bennett. The shock hit me so hard I almost dropped the key. My mother had vanished when I was a child, leaving only questions behind. And now, here was her name carved into an object, lying at the very gate where someone had just entered. Gregory looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "What is it?" he asked. I closed my hand around the key, not ready to share everything. "Just something old," I whispered. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't just old. It was connected to her, and somehow to whoever had written that unfinished message on my mirror. The night pressed in, heavier than before, and one thought burned through my mind. Whoever had been in my house tonight wasn't a stranger. They were tied to my family, to secrets buried years ago, and they weren't finished. When Gregory finally left, promising to keep an eye out from his porch, I locked every door and window twice. Still, I didn't feel safe. I sat on the edge of my bed with the brass key in my hand, the letters M.B. carved into it, cutting into my palm like a brand. My mother's initials. I hadn't spoken her name out loud in years. She had vanished without warning when I was 9, leaving me with my grandmother and a life full of half-answers. The police back then had called it an unresolved disappearance. I called it abandonment. But now, after seeing her initials carved into an object left by someone inside my house, I wasn't sure what to call it anymore. I stared at the mirror again. The red letters across the glass glared back at me. "I'll come back at midnight." That unfinished word gnawed at me. Why stop writing? Why leave me hanging at the edge of fear? My chest tightened as I stood and leaned close to the mirror. The dried strokes looked like rust or paint, not fresh blood like I first feared. I reached out and touched it, and my fingertip came back with a faint powdery smear. Whoever wrote this wanted it to look threatening, but not impossible to wipe away. I grabbed a kettle from the kitchen, filled it, and set it to boil. A memory stirred. My grandmother once told me this mirror was temperamental, that when the glass fogged, sometimes words or shapes appeared from the condensation, as if the mirror remembered things that had been near it. At the time, I laughed it off as one of her strange superstitions, but now, superstition didn't seem so silly. When the steam finally rose, I carried the kettle back and let the hot air roll across the glass. Slowly, faint lines began to bleed through the haze. My breath hitched as more words appeared under the original message. My name, written faint but clear in curling letters. Nora. The full message now read, "I'll come back at midnight, Nora." I stumbled back, my knees weak. Whoever had been here knew my name, knew where I slept, and wanted me to read this only when the mirror fogged. It was no random threat. It was personal. I sat on the floor, pulling my knees up to my chest. My mind raced to every person who could be behind this. Rowan Carter with his chipped boots, who knew the layout of the house. Daniel Wright, who admitted he had been outside earlier. Gregory Hale, who always seemed to be watching too closely. But none of them explained the brass key with my mother's initials. None of them explained why this was tied to her. I lifted the key to my lips, whispering her name, something I hadn't done in years. Margaret. The word felt strange, foreign. And then I saw it. In the corner of the mirror, hidden in the fog, a small arrow shape, faint but deliberate, pointing downward toward the dresser the mirror rested on. My hands shook as I slid the heavy frame aside. Behind it, the wall felt uneven. My fingers found the edge of a narrow wooden panel, and when I pressed against it, the wood shifted slightly with a dull creak. A hidden space. I slid the brass key into a tiny lock almost invisible in the shadowed seam. It fit. My heart hammered as the mechanism clicked. The panel opened just a fraction, releasing a smell of old wood and something metallic. Inside was a small bundle of objects wrapped in cloth. I pulled it out, my pulse racing. The cloth unrolled in my lap, revealing 3 old 8mm tapes, a folded photograph of my mother holding me as a child, and a brittle envelope with handwriting I recognized instantly. It was hers. The envelope was sealed, her name scrawled across the front in ink faded to brown. My fingers shook as I held it, the weight of the past pressing down. My mother hadn't just vanished. She had left something behind, hidden in the very mirror where I now saw warnings meant for me. And suddenly, the thought chilled me to my bones. Maybe she hadn't run away at all. Maybe she had known someone would come back. I sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor, the old envelope trembling in my hands. My mother's handwriting, shaky but still graceful, seemed to pull me back 20 years in an instant. For so long, I told myself she had abandoned me, that she had simply walked away and never looked back. But holding that letter, sealed and hidden behind a mirror only she could have chosen, forced me to face another possibility, that she had left it for me to find one day. Maybe she had known I would return to this house. Maybe she had known something dark would follow. I slid my finger carefully under the brittle flap. The paper threatened to tear, but it gave way with a soft rip. The letter inside was short, only a page, the ink faded but still legible under the dim lamp. My eyes raced over the words. Nora, if you're reading this, I may already be gone. Do not trust the man who comes at midnight. He wears his boots until the soles are worn through, and he will not stop until he gets what he wants. Keep the key, protect what is hidden, and remember, family isn't always who you think it is. M.B. I read the words again and again, each line clawing deeper into me. The man who comes at midnight, the chipped boot sole, the key. My chest grew heavy as I realized my mother wasn't warning me about a stranger at all. She was warning me about someone she already knew. Someone who had likely been inside this house before. My eyes moved to the 3 8mm tapes lying on the floor. I didn't have a player in the house, but Mrs. Whitaker, who owned the antique shop 2 blocks away, had one. She always fussed about old things, saying they deserved to breathe again. I tucked the tapes into a bag, but before I could stand, a noise rattled me to the core. The sound came from the hallway, a low creak, as if weight pressed down on the floorboards just outside my bedroom door. I froze, clutching the envelope against my chest. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until another faint sound followed. 3 slow knocks on the wall. Not the door. The wall. Every hair on my body stood on end. Someone was inside the house. I crawled to the edge of the doorframe, my breath shallow. The hallway was dark, the grandfather clock ticking steadily, each sound louder than the last. I thought of Gregory, who had sworn he'd gone home. I thought of Rowan, who had reason to be familiar with every inch of this house. And I thought of Daniel, who had admitted to watching from the street. I tightened my grip on the brass key as if it could protect me. The knocks stopped, replaced by silence again. Then a whisper floated through the hall, thin and ragged, just loud enough to reach me. "Nora." I stumbled back, my pulse roaring in my ears. It wasn't Gregory's voice. It wasn't Daniel's or Rowan's. It was older, softer, and carried a strange familiarity that twisted my insides. For a fleeting second, I thought, it sounded like my mother. But that couldn't be. The whisper came again, this time closer, as if standing right on the other side of the door. "Nora. Midnight." The letter slipped from my hands. I pressed my back against the mirror, the weight of the tapes digging into my side. Whoever was in my house wasn't finished. They had left me a warning, and now they wanted me to know. They were still here, waiting for the clock to strike. The whisper clung to the air long after it faded, seeping into my bones. I sat frozen against the mirror, my palms slick with sweat, the brass key digging painfully into my fist. The hallway beyond my door was silent again, but silence was worse. It left my mind to fill in every possible horror waiting out there. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I forced myself to move. I slid the envelope and tapes back into the bag and tucked it under the bed, out of sight. Then, gripping the lamp like a weapon, I inched toward the bedroom door. The knob felt icy in my hand. I twisted it slowly and cracked the door open, just enough to peer into the hall. The hallway stretched out, empty. The grandfather clock at the far end glowed faintly, its brass pendulum swinging side to side. But then I noticed something that made my stomach clench. One of the picture frames on the wall was crooked. I had walked down this hall a dozen times tonight. I knew it hadn't been like that before. I stepped into the hall, my bare feet whispering across the boards. As I reached for the tilted frame, the floor groaned loudly under my weight, echoing in the stillness. I froze, listening. A faint shuffle answered me from somewhere deeper in the house, so soft it could have been fabric brushing against wood. Someone was moving. I backed away, gripping the lamp tighter. My first instinct was to call Gregory, but then I remembered how easily he had inserted himself into my night already. He knew too much, almost like he'd been waiting for me to panic. My ex, Daniel, had admitted he'd been outside the house, and Rowan's boots matched the footprint. All 3 were suspects. But the whisper that spoke my name didn't sound like any of them. It sounded like someone who knew me. I forced myself forward, passing the tilted frame. That's when I saw it. Another footprint. Smaller than the one in the living room, this one was pressed faintly into the rug, as though tracked in without intention. My blood ran cold. The first set of prints had stopped at the mirror. But this one was fresh. This meant the intruder hadn't left. I followed the faint mark down the hall, past the kitchen, into the sitting room. The air was cooler here, as if the window had been opened, though it was shut tight. My eyes darted to the corner, and that's when I saw it. The rocking chair. My grandmother's old wooden chair by the window. It was moving, slowly rocking back and forth, squeaking softly against the floor. My breath caught. I hadn't touched that chair in years. I edged closer, my throat dry. The chair slowed, then stilled, as if mocking me. On the seat lay a folded scrap of paper, yellowed and thin. With trembling fingers, I picked it up and opened it. Scrawled in the same faded handwriting from my mother's letter were just 4 words: "He never forgives midnight." My knees nearly gave out. The paper slipped from my hand, fluttering to the floor. My mother's warnings, the footprints, the voice. It all tangled into something I couldn't untangle fast enough. Whoever this was, they weren't just tormenting me tonight. They had been here before, in this very house, years ago. The clock chimed 11:15. In less than an hour, it would be midnight. And I knew then that midnight wasn't just a time. Midnight was the moment he came back. The ticking of the grandfather clock echoed through every corner of the house, each swing of the pendulum a hammer striking down on my nerves. 11:15. The scrap of paper still lay at my feet, its message carved into my brain. He never forgives midnight. Whoever he was, my mother had feared him enough to hide clues, tapes, and a letter behind the mirror. And now I was walking the same halls she once had, waiting for the same shadow to come back. I couldn't sit idle and wait to be found. I needed to take control. My eyes fell to the brass key clutched tight in my hand. It had unlocked the hidden panel behind the mirror. What else might it fit? I hurried back to the bedroom, the lamp bobbing in my grip, shadows dancing across the walls. My breath sounded loud, too loud, and every creak of the old floorboards felt like it announced my presence to whoever might still be inside. Inside my room, I shut the door quietly and dragged the dresser against it for some small barrier. My bag with the tapes and my mother's letter still waited beneath the bed. I pulled it out and laid everything on the floor. The 3 tapes sat like tiny black secrets, their reels dusty but intact. If they contained anything like the warning letter, I had to see them. But then my eyes shifted to the mirror. The faint arrow-shaped smear that had led me to the hidden space earlier still lingered in the glass. I leaned closer, trying to see if there were other markings. With the kettle still warm from before, I let the steam coat the mirror once more. The words glowed again. "I'll come back at midnight, Nora." This time, though, something else bled through. Beneath my name, faint and almost invisible, a shape appeared, a circle with a line through it, drawn like some crude clock face pointing to 12. My pulse quickened. Whoever wrote on this mirror wanted me to understand that midnight wasn't just a threat. It was an appointment. I paced the room, the brass key heavy in my pocket. I thought of the suspects. Gregory, with his nosy habits and watchful eyes. Rowan, whose chipped boot matched the print on my floor. Daniel, who had admitted to being outside earlier. Any of them could be the intruder. But none of them explained the voice that had whispered my name. None of them explained the letter written by my mother. I decided then I wouldn't wait to be cornered. If midnight was when he came, then I would be ready. I grabbed a bag of flour from the pantry and scattered it lightly across the hallway floor. Any step would leave a trail I could follow. I tied a strand of bells, Christmas decorations from years ago, onto the front door latch and the back gate, so even the slightest move would jingle. I propped my phone against a stack of books on the dresser, its camera aimed directly at the mirror. If someone came into my room again, I would catch them. Finally, I sat down by the mirror itself. The lamp dimmed to a soft glow. My mother's letter clenched in my lap. The clock ticked steadily closer to midnight, every second dragging like a weight. My heart raced, not knowing if I was preparing to catch a trespasser or face something far worse. At 11:45, a faint sound cut through the silence. The jingle of bells. My blood froze. The front latch had moved. The bells on the front latch gave the faintest tremor, just enough to ring out once, a hollow, tinny sound that felt deafening in the stillness of the house. I sat perfectly still, clutching the lamp by its base, my breath caught somewhere high in my chest. One ring, then silence. Whoever was at the door had tested it carefully, not barged in. My pulse hammered in my ears. I slid off the bed and lowered myself to the floor, crawling toward the gap at the bottom of the bedroom door. The faint light from the hallway spilled in, painting a thin line across the rug. My eyes strained. I waited, listening, every nerve alive with tension. Then I saw it. Slow, deliberate. A shadow moved across the hallway floor. A boot. It pressed into the flour I had scattered earlier, leaving behind a clean, heavy print. My heart stopped when I saw the shape clearly. The same triangular chip at the heel, just like the one I had studied near the mirror. My stomach turned to ice. Whoever this was, they were inside, moving carefully down the hallway. The floor creaked softly as the figure paused. I bit down on my lip, forcing myself not to gasp. The shadow shifted, and then I heard it. The faint scrape of a fingernail against the wall, trailing along the plaster as they walked. The sound traveled closer, closer, until it stopped right outside my door. The knob twisted once, slow and deliberate, testing against the dresser I had dragged in front of it. A faint rattle followed, as though the intruder expected to be let in. Then a whisper seeped through the thin wood of the door. "Nora." My throat tightened, my skin crawling. That voice again. Not Gregory's low rumble, not Rowan's blunt tone, not Daniel's familiar drawl. This voice was older, tired, like someone who carried years of dust in their lungs. And worse, it carried a softness I remembered from childhood, an echo of my mother's lullabies. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from crying. Out. The knob rattled again, harder this time, and the dresser groaned under the pressure. I scrambled back and stared at the mirror, the words glowing faintly in the lamplight. "I'll come back at midnight, Nora." My hands shook as the clock ticked closer. 11:50, 11:51. Time was crawling toward the hour the intruder wanted. I turned to the bag under the bed and yanked it open. My fingers brushed against the tapes, then the letter, then the photograph. I pulled the picture free, holding it under the lamplight. My mother's face stared back at me, young and alive, cradling me as a baby. But there was something I hadn't noticed before. At the edge of the frame, barely visible, stood a man. His body cropped halfway, his hand resting on the back of my mother's chair. And on his boot, faint but clear, was the same triangular chip in the sole. My chest constricted. The same boot, the same man. Whoever was outside my door now had been standing in that photo with my mother decades ago. The knob stilled. Silence fell again, thick and suffocating. For a moment, I thought he might have left. I pressed my ear against the door, straining for any sound. Then the grandfather clock in the hall chimed 3 long, deep notes, 11:55. And with the third chime, a new sound came. Not at the door, not in the hall. Behind me. The mirror. It groaned faintly, like wood shifting, though no one touched it. I spun around in terror just in time to see the glass ripple as if a breath of air had passed across its surface. The letters smeared darker, thicker, forming one more word that hadn't been there before. Now. My heart lurched. Whoever had been in my house wasn't waiting for midnight anymore. Midnight had come early. The word on the mirror bled through the glass like it had been waiting there all along. Now. Just 3 letters, but enough to make my blood run cold. My pulse thundered so loudly I almost couldn't hear the silence that followed. The knob at the bedroom door had gone still, the dresser pressed tight against it, but the danger hadn't gone. It had simply shifted, waiting for me to make a mistake. I crept backward until my shoulders brushed the cold wall. My eyes never left the mirror. The glass looked the same as it always had, tall and heavy, its old brass frame etched with fading floral patterns. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror itself was no longer an object. It was watching me, reflecting not just my face, but something behind me, something I couldn't quite see. The clock in the hall chimed again, 11:56, 4 minutes until midnight. And then the noise came. Soft, deliberate footsteps circling the outside of the house. I could hear the crunch of gravel, the faint brush of fabric against siding. Whoever was out there had left the hallway, maybe even slipped out the back gate. But they hadn't gone far. They were circling me, like a predator that had all the time in the world. I tightened my grip on the brass key, my only weapon other than the lamp. My mind ran through every possibility. Gregory had been the first to come over tonight, too eager, too prepared. Rowan's boots matched the print, and his work inside the house gave him access to every corner. Daniel's sudden confession about watching the house made no sense, unless he wanted me to believe he cared enough to admit it. But none of their voices matched the whisper. None of them explained the photograph of my mother with the man in the chipped-heel boot. I crawled toward the dresser and pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then, faint but clear, a voice rose again, low, breathy, just above a whisper. "You opened it, didn't you? The mirror, the key." The blood drained from my face. They knew, whoever this was, they weren't just playing with me. They knew about the secret panel, about the tapes and the letter. I clutched the tapes tighter against my chest. My mother had hidden them for a reason, and if he wanted them this badly, then they had to hold the truth she never got to speak. The floor creaked above me. My heart lurched. He was upstairs. He wasn't at the door anymore. He was inside, moving across the upper floorboards with the patience of someone who had done this before. I darted to the closet and pulled it open, shoving the tapes and the letter inside a shoebox on the top shelf. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped them, but I managed to slide the box back just as another sound pierced the silence. A long, slow drag across the ceiling, like furniture being scraped across the floor. The clock chimed 11:58. I turned back to the mirror. My reflection stared, pale and wild-eyed, but the glass had changed again. The letters smeared into new shapes, spreading downward until they formed a crude outline. A stick figure, a figure with one hand raised, pointing directly downward, at me. The mirror shook once, rattling against the wall. I staggered back, tripping over the rug, my chest heaving. The scraping above stopped, and then, with a heavy thud, the attic door in the hallway dropped open. The ladder unfolded slowly, creaking as though unseen hands were lowering it one rung at a time. I clutched the brass key so tightly it cut into my palm. The voice came again, closer now, drifting down the dark hallway. "Midnight, Nora. Just like your mother." The final chime of the clock struck. Midnight, and in that instant the lamp flickered and went out. The lamp blinked once, twice, and then went out, swallowing the room in suffocating darkness. My breath caught as the last echo of the grandfather clock's midnight chime faded. The silence that followed wasn't silence at all. It was filled with tiny sounds, the ones you only notice when fear sharpens every sense. The faint shift of the old wood beams above me, the whisper of fabric brushing against the walls, the creak of a rung on the attic ladder as weight settled on it. He was in the house, not outside anymore, not lingering in the shadows, inside, descending from the attic like he'd always belonged here. I pressed myself against the mirror, the cool glass biting into my back. My eyes strained to adjust, to find some sliver of light. The moon outside was my only ally, bleeding faintly through the curtains. My hands fumbled for the lamp switch, desperate to spark it back to life, but it stayed dead. The power was still on. My phone on the dresser glowed faintly, but the lamp had been cut. Someone had tampered with it. A deliberate choice. He wanted me in the dark. The ladder creaked again, slow, methodical. I imagined a figure stepping down, one foot after the other, boots striking wood. I thought of the triangular chip in the footprint and felt sick. I forced myself to move, crouching low as I slid across the floor to the dresser. My phone leaned there, still recording the mirror, its screen faintly lit. I grabbed it, tucking it close. The recording would capture this if I didn't make it out alive. The voice came again, low and steady, drifting down the hallway like smoke. "You're just like her. Always curious, always searching where you shouldn't." My chest tightened. My mother. Whoever this was, he knew her. Not as a stranger, not as a passing acquaintance. His words carried the familiarity of someone who had spent nights in this house before, who'd been close enough to whisper the same threats to her. I crawled toward the closet, the shoebox hidden at the top shelf weighing on my mind. The tapes, the letter, the photograph. He wanted them, I was sure of it. My mother hadn't just hidden them for me, she had hidden them from him. The sound of boots finally touched the hallway floor. The ladder groaned as it settled back in place. Then silence again. But I could feel him. Every nerve in my body screamed that he was there, watching, waiting for me to reveal myself. I eased open the closet door and slipped inside, pulling it shut behind me. Darkness engulfed me, but I didn't dare turn on my phone light. I crouched low, pressing my back to the wall, clutching the brass key like a weapon. My breathing was shallow, but no matter how much I tried to quiet it, the air rasped in and out of my lungs. Footsteps moved slowly down the hallway, steady and patient. He wasn't rushing. He had all the time in the world. The steps stopped outside my bedroom door. The dresser I had dragged earlier groaned as pressure leaned against it. A long pause stretched, and then tap, 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 fingernails against the wood. My stomach turned over. "You found it, didn't you?" His voice was closer now, just beyond the door. The mirror, the key. She thought she was clever hiding it there, thought you'd never piece it together. My throat went dry. I wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but terror glued my tongue to the roof of my mouth. I pressed the brass key into my palm so hard it dug into the skin, grounding me, keeping me from shaking apart. The dresser scraped suddenly, shoving against the floor. My heart leapt into my throat. He was moving it, pushing slowly, forcing his way in. I crouched lower, curling myself into the corner of the closet. The door cracked open with a drawn-out creak. The room beyond filled with his presence before I even saw him. Heavy boots stepped inside, crunching faintly on the flour I had sprinkled. The faint moonlight from the curtains stretched enough for me to catch glimpses. Broad shoulders, a tall frame, movements deliberate and unhurried. Then I saw it. The boot. Even in the dim light, the triangular chip in the heel was unmistakable. My chest clenched. The same boot from the footprint. The same boot from the photograph with my mother. He was real. And he had been here all along. He stopped in front of the mirror, his shadow spilling across it. My breath hitched when I realized the reflection showed more than I could see with my eyes. The mirror caught him fully, his face half hidden under the shadow of a worn cap, features carved by age, but his eyes, sharp, dark, familiar. Eyes I had seen in the photograph, eyes that echoed my own. The voice softened. Almost a sigh. "Your mother thought she could protect you, thought she could shut me out. But blood doesn't vanish, Nora. It waits, and at midnight it always comes back." Blood. The word sent a chill down my spine. He turned slowly, scanning the room. His gaze passed over the closet door, lingering as though he could sense me crouched in the shadows. My hands trembled, and I covered my mouth to silence my breathing. The floorboard just beneath my foot betrayed me. It squeaked, so soft I barely heard it, but his head snapped toward the closet. The footsteps came closer, slow, deliberate. He stopped right outside the door. The wood shivered faintly as his hand pressed against it. Then, in that same calm, low voice, he whispered, "Come out, Nora. It's time you knew why your mother left." My chest heaved, torn between terror and desperate curiosity. My entire life had been built on her disappearance. I had told myself she abandoned me, but this man's words hinted at something else, something darker. I gripped the brass key tighter, my knuckles white. I couldn't stay hidden. He wasn't going to leave. With shaking hands, I pushed the closet door open just a crack. Moonlight spilled across the man's face. He was older, maybe in his 60s, his hair thin and gray, his skin weathered like old leather. But his eyes, those eyes were what made my breath stop. They weren't just familiar. They were the same dark eyes from the photo of my mother holding me as a baby, the eyes of the man standing behind her chair, and deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge I knew. This wasn't just an intruder. This was my father. I staggered backward, the closet wall pressing against me. He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing the floor. "She tried to keep you from me," he said, his voice steady, almost mournful. "But you were mine all along. Midnight is ours, Nora, just like it was hers." The mirror behind him quivered again, the letters glowing faintly as if feeding on his words. My stomach twisted. My mother hadn't abandoned me. She had hidden me from him. And now, at midnight, he had come back to claim what he thought was his. The air in the bedroom turned heavy, thick, as though the house itself was holding its breath. I stood frozen in the half-light, staring into eyes that I recognized and hated at the same time. My father. The word clawed its way into my mind, impossible to accept yet undeniable. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to push past him, but my legs felt nailed to the floor. He took one step closer, the chipped heel of his boot striking the wood with a hollow thud. "I watched you grow up from the shadows," he said, his voice disturbingly calm. "Your mother thought she could erase me, lock me out of my own blood. But you look just like her. Every time I see you, it's like she's standing in front of me again." His words twisted in my chest, a sick echo of the lullabies I remembered my mother humming before she vanished. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak. My voice came out raw and shaking. "She didn't erase you. She ran from you. Why?" He tilted his head, his expression flickering into something dark, almost a smile. "Because she was weak. She didn't understand what I was building. The mirror, the key. She thought hiding them would stop me. But she underestimated you. I knew you'd be stronger. I knew you'd come back here one day. Midnight was always meant for us." I shook my head violently. "You're lying. She didn't just vanish. Something happened to her. Did you—" My throat caught on the word. "Did you kill her?" His silence was worse than an answer. He just watched me unblinking, as if the weight of the question didn't matter. Then, in a low murmur, he said, "She made her choice. She chose to disappear instead of standing by me. But choices always have consequences." The floor seemed to sway beneath me. I wanted to scream, to claw the truth out of him, but I couldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. My hand clenched around the brass key so tight it cut into my skin. I felt a drop of blood slide down my palm, hot and sticky. He noticed. His eyes flicked to the key, then back to me. "Ah," he breathed. "She gave it to you, didn't she? Or maybe you found it where she hid it, always leaving little gifts behind." He took another step, closing the space between us. His shadow merged with mine, and I could smell him now. Old sweat, tobacco, and something metallic that made my stomach churn. I forced myself to move, stepping sideways until my back brushed the mirror. I could feel the glass vibrating faintly, as if it was alive, responding to his presence. The letters smeared across it glowed faintly in the dark. "I'll come back at midnight, Nora." And beneath it, the stick figure outline with its arm pointing downward. I remembered my mother's words from the letter. "Do not trust the man who comes at midnight. He wears his boots until the soles are worn through, and he will not stop until he gets what he wants." The man in front of me wasn't just dangerous, he was relentless. "You don't belong here," I whispered, forcing my voice to steady. "This is my house now, not yours." He laughed, soft and low, like it was a private joke only he understood. "Your house? Child, this house was always mine. Your mother built her cage here, and she locked herself inside it. But you've opened the door. You've done what she was too afraid to do." His eyes narrowed. "That makes you mine too." Rage surged through me, burning hotter than fear. "I am not yours." Before he could react, I shoved the lamp forward, slamming it against his chest with every ounce of strength I had. The glass shattered, sparks flying as the bulb burst. He staggered back with a grunt, but he didn't fall. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with terrifying strength. Pain shot up my arm as he yanked me closer, his breath hot against my face. "You're stronger than her," he hissed, "but strength without loyalty means nothing." I twisted, kicking at his shin, but he barely flinched. Panic flared. I wasn't strong enough to fight him head on. My eyes darted to the mirror behind me. My mother had hidden the tapes there. She had chosen that mirror for a reason. It wasn't just a hiding place. It was a warning, maybe even a weapon. Desperation drove me. With my free hand, I grabbed the edge of the mirror frame and yanked. The heavy glass tilted forward, crashing into him with a crack that shook the floor. He cursed, stumbling backward, his grip loosening just enough for me to tear free. The mirror shattered across the boards, shards flying like knives. In the splinters of glass, the reflection of his face stared back at me in a dozen broken pieces, twisted and distorted. And in one shard, I saw something else. A reflection of the attic above us. For a split second, I thought I saw her. My mother, her pale face staring down from the dark, lips moving soundlessly. I blinked and it was gone. My father roared, shoving the broken mirror aside. "You think you can hide behind her ghost? She left you, Nora. She chose to leave me." "No," I spat, backing toward the closet where the tapes were hidden. "She chose to protect me from you." His face twisted, and in that moment, I knew the truth. He hadn't killed her. Not directly. But he had. Driven her away, forced her into hiding, maybe worse. The missing pieces were still tangled in shadows, but one thing was clear. My mother had feared him enough to carve warnings into glass and leave behind evidence for me to find. He lunged toward me, and instinct took over. I grabbed the shoebox from the closet shelf, clutching it to my chest. His eyes narrowed when he saw it. "Give it to me," he growled. "No." The single word steadied me. I stepped back, holding the box tighter. "You'll never have it. Not now, not ever." The tension between us was a wire stretched to breaking. Then suddenly a new sound cut through the air, the faint jingle of bells from the front door. Both our heads snapped toward it. Someone else was here. For the first time, my father's mask of calm cracked. His eyes widened, and for a fleeting moment I saw fear flicker there. Whoever had just entered wasn't part of his plan. Boots pounded against the porch, heavy and certain. A voice called out sharply, firm and commanding. "Nora, it's Gregory, open up!" My father's expression twisted into fury. He backed toward the shadows, his body tensed like a cornered animal. "This isn't over," he whispered. "Midnight is only the beginning." And before I could stop him, he darted toward the open attic ladder, moving with startling speed for a man his age. The boards groaned as he disappeared into the darkness above, leaving me trembling among the shards of the shattered mirror, clutching the shoebox like it was my last tether to the truth. The front door burst open, and Gregory's flashlight beam cut through the gloom. He froze when he saw me, bleeding hand, broken mirror, eyes wide with terror. "Nora, what happened? Who was here?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. All I could do was hold up the shoebox, the tapes inside rattling softly, and whisper the only words that made sense. My mother tried to warn me. Gregory's flashlight beam cut across the room, catching the broken shards of the mirror on the floor and throwing fractured light in every direction. For a moment, it looked like the walls themselves were splintering, the house groaning under the weight of secrets that had been sealed inside it for decades. He stood in the doorway, his wide frame filling it, his breathing heavy from rushing over. His eyes swept the scene. The tipped dresser, the shattered mirror, my bleeding hand clutching the brass key, and the shoebox pressed tight against my chest. "Nora," he said again, his voice low, more careful this time. Tell me what happened. Who was here? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. The words were stuck in my throat, blocked by the fear that if I spoke them, they would become more real. My father. That man wasn't just an intruder. He was my blood, the shadow of my past that my mother had tried to bury. I swallowed hard and finally managed a whisper. He was here. Gregory stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a quiet click. Who? I pressed my back against the wall, still shaking. My father, I breathed. He came back. Gregory's brow furrowed deeply, his jaw tightening. For a moment, he didn't look surprised. That was what chilled me. His expression wasn't one of shock, but of recognition, like he had expected this all along. My chest tightened. You knew, I accused softly. You knew about him. Gregory didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, his flashlight lowering to the ground, the beam cutting across the triangular imprint of a boot, still fresh in the flour on the hallway floor. His eyes followed it, and when he looked back at me, his face was unreadable. I knew. Stories, he admitted finally. Rumors about your mother, about a man who came around at night. The town whispered, but no one ever spoke straight. When she vanished, everyone assumed she left on her own. No, I snapped, clutching the shoebox tighter. She didn't leave. She was hiding from him. Gregory's shoulders sagged, as if the weight of years pressed down on him. Maybe so, he murmured. But if he's back now, Nora, you're not safe here. The words rang true, yet I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at me. Why hadn't Gregory looked shocked? Why did it feel like he had been waiting for this night, almost anticipating it? I thought back to the way he had appeared earlier, right after I called. Too fast, too ready, and now here he was again, at the exact moment my father vanished into the attic. Why are you here, Gregory? I asked carefully, my voice trembling. He met my gaze, his face hard. Because I heard the bells. I told you I'd keep an eye on you, and when I saw your lights flicker, I knew something was wrong. It was a reasonable answer. Too reasonable. The grandfather clock ticked on, each second grinding into my nerves. The attic above us creaked faintly, reminding me he hadn't truly gone. My father was up there, in the dark, watching, waiting. Gregory turned his flashlight toward the ceiling. He's still here, isn't he? I nodded. Gregory's lips pressed into a thin line. Then we end this. Tonight. The firmness in his voice rattled me. He spoke like a man who had prepared for this moment, like he had been waiting for years. A part of me wanted to cling to him, to believe he was the protector I needed right now. But another part whispered that I couldn't trust anyone. Not when my father had known about the mirror, the key, the tapes. Someone must have told him. And Gregory knew too much. I took a shaky step back, putting the broken shards of the mirror between us. Why should I trust you? I demanded. He froze, his face flickering with something unreadable. Because if you don't, you'll be alone with him. The house groaned. Again, louder this time. Dust fell from the attic ladder, the boards above straining under weight. He hadn't left. My father was listening, waiting for me to make a choice. I looked down at the shoebox in my arms, the tapes rattling faintly inside. My mother's letter echoed in my mind. Do not trust the man who comes at midnight. Protect what is hidden. She hadn't said anything about Gregory, but she had warned me that family isn't always who you think it is. And now I was standing between two men who both claimed ties to my family. I swallowed hard. If you really want to help me, I said, forcing my voice to steady, then help me see what's on these tapes. Right now. Gregory's gaze flicked to the box, his flashlight beam landing on it like a spotlight. For the first time that night, his calm cracked. His eyes widened just slightly, and I caught it, the flicker of recognition. He knew about the tapes. My blood turned cold. You know what they are. He didn't answer right away. Then he sighed, long and heavy. Your mother came to me once before she disappeared. She was scared out of her mind. Said she had evidence, something that could destroy him. She gave me a tape to hold, just one. I watched it, and I swore if he ever came back, I'd help protect you. Why didn't you tell me? My voice broke. Why did you let me think she abandoned me all these years? Because, he said sharply, stepping closer, if you knew the truth, he would have found you sooner. She made me promise to let you grow up normal. But normal doesn't last forever, Nora. Midnight always comes. The words struck like a blade. Midnight always comes. The same phrase my father had whispered, the same threat scrawled on my mirror. The attic boomed suddenly with a heavy stomp. Both of us jerked our heads upward. A voice echoed from above, distorted but clear. She kept you weak, Nora. Both of them did. Gregory, the loyal hound. Your mother, the coward. But you're mine. Midnight is ours. Gregory's face hardened. He turned to me, urgency burning in his eyes. You need to see the tapes. Now. They'll tell you everything. But once you do, you'll never be able to unsee it. The attic ladder groaned again. Another step. He was coming back down. I clutched the shoebox tighter, my hands trembling. My world had shrunk to two choices. Trust Gregory and watch the tapes, or face my father blind to the truth. Either way, the house was about to erupt with whatever had been buried here for decades. My mother's voice echoed in my head, pulled from memory, faint but certain. Protect what is hidden. I straightened my shoulders, blood still dripping from my palm around the brass key. My decision solidified. Then take me to Mrs. Whitaker's shop, I said quickly. She has a player. We'll watch them there, away from this house, away from him. Gregory hesitated, then nodded firmly. Good, but we have to move fast. The attic above us shook with a furious roar. My father had heard every word, and as Gregory reached for my arm to pull me toward the door, I realized that midnight wasn't just a time on the clock. Midnight was the moment the past broke through the present, and there was no running from it anymore. The house felt like a living thing now. Groaning beams, rattling pipes, air heavy with dust and memory. Gregory's grip on my arm was strong but not painful, more like a lifeline as he pulled me toward the hallway. The shoebox pressed against my chest like a beating heart. Above us, the attic roared again, boards flexing under weight. My father was moving fast now, his boots pounding across the ceiling, every strike matching the pulse, hammering in my ears. Gregory whispered urgently, "We can't go through the front. He'll be there first. We take the back gate. Fast, quiet, do you understand?" I nodded but didn't loosen my grip on the tapes. We moved quickly down the hall, my bare feet silent, his boots muffled by the rug. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, mocking us with each swing of its pendulum. Midnight had passed, but it wasn't over. Midnight had become a state of being, and we were inside it. When we reached the kitchen, Gregory paused, sweeping his flashlight across the room. Everything looked the same as I'd left it earlier. The kettle still warm, the flour bag tipped on its side. But the air had shifted. It felt colder, thicker. Then I saw it. Another footprint. This one wasn't from Gregory or me. It was planted in the middle of the kitchen tiles, still wet with red clay, pointed directly toward the back door. I froze. He's already been through here. Gregory's jaw tightened. Move. We crept to the back door. The bells I'd tied to the latch earlier hung twisted. One of them snapped clean off and lying on the floor. My heart sank. He had known. He had been here, had stepped right through my traps like they were nothing. Gregory reached for the lock, but before he could turn it, a sound rose from behind us. Slow clapping, muffled but unmistakable. We spun around. At the far end of the kitchen, where the hallway met the sitting room, a figure stood just inside the edge of the flashlight beam. My father. His tall frame filled the space, boots planted wide, the chipped heel glinting in the weak light. His cap shadowed his face, but his eyes caught the beam, dark and sharp, glittering like shards of obsidian. "Well done," he said softly, his voice almost a purr. "You've made it more interesting than I expected." Gregory shifted, angling himself between me and the man. "Stay behind me," he murmured. My father took a step forward, boots crunching on the scattered flour. "Gregory Hale," he said, his tone curling into mockery. "The watchful neighbor. The old guard dog. Did she tell you everything? Or did you just guess?" Gregory's shoulders squared. "I knew enough." "You knew enough to keep her from me," my father said, his voice dropping. "Years of hiding, years of secrets. And yet, here we are." He took another step forward. "You don't get to play hero now, Greg. You were part of this. Don't forget." Gregory stiffened. I felt it. A tremor of guilt passing through him. My stomach dropped. "What does he mean?" I whispered. Gregory didn't answer. My father smiled, slow and deliberate. "Oh, he didn't tell you? He was there the night your mother vanished. He helped her pack, helped her run. But he also helped me look for her. He's been playing both sides since the beginning." The words hit like a blow. "Greg?" Gregory's jaw clenched, his eyes locked on my father. "He's twisting it," he said quickly. "Your mother came to me for help. I tried to protect her. I didn't know—" "Didn't know what?" My father cut in. "That you'd end up protecting her daughter too? That you'd become the warden of her little secret?" Gregory's voice hardened. "I swore I'd keep her safe. I don't regret that." My father's laughter was low and dangerous. "And yet you brought her right back to me." He lunged forward. Gregory shoved me behind him just as my father's boots slammed against the floor, scattering flour like a bloodstain. The kitchen erupted into chaos. My father moved fast, faster than a man his age should, slamming into Gregory's shoulder, sending them both crashing into the counter. Dishes clattered and shattered across the tile. I stumbled back, clutching the shoebox, my back hitting the refrigerator. "Stop!" I screamed. But my voice was swallowed by the sound of their struggle. Gregory swung his flashlight like a club, connecting with my father's arm. My father grunted but didn't release his grip. He slammed Gregory against the counter again, knocking the breath out of him. "Give me the tapes, Nora," my father roared, his voice breaking its calm at last. "They're mine." "They're not yours," I shouted back, gripping the shoebox so tight my knuckles burned. Gregory twisted, trying to pin my father's arm, but the older man drove an elbow into Gregory's ribs. He gasped, dropping the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, spinning, slicing the dark into frantic arcs. I backed toward the back door, my fingers fumbling for the lock. If I could just get outside, run to Mrs. Whitaker's shop, call the police, something. But the latch wouldn't turn. My father had jammed it somehow. Gregory snarled, shoving my father back a step. "Run, Nora," he barked. "Go!" I tried the lock again, my heart hammering, but it held fast. My father's eyes snapped to me, dark and blazing. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed. Gregory lunged at him. Again, and this time my father swung the heavy metal kettle from the stove. It struck Gregory across the temple with a dull, sickening thud. Gregory crumpled to the floor, dazed but not unconscious, groaning as he clutched his head. I screamed his name, but my father was already moving toward me. "Give me the tapes," he demanded, his voice low and lethal now. "Your mother stole from me, hid everything from me, but you're not her. You're mine. Give them to me, and I'll let you walk away." I backed up until I hit the counter, the shoebox pressed tight against me. "She wasn't hiding from you because of the tapes," I said, my voice trembling but loud enough to cut through the room. "She was hiding because you're a monster." He stopped, his eyes flicking with something like pain or rage. "You don't know what she did," he said quietly. "You don't know what she made me do." My hand shook, but I raised the brass key between us like a blade. "I know enough." For a heartbeat, everything went still. The flashlight beam spun one last time across the kitchen and landed on my father's face. In that frozen moment, I saw it clearly. Not just the man he was now, but the man in the photograph. standing behind my mother's chair, his hand resting on her shoulder, smiling. Then the spell broke. He lunged. I dodged sideways, the shoebox slipping from my grip. It tumbled to the floor, bursting open. Tapes clattered across the tile, one of them skidding under the table. The photograph fluttered out, landing face up between us. My father's eyes snapped to it. His hand shot down, snatching it up like it was the only thing that mattered. I grabbed the nearest tape and bolted for the hallway, my bare feet sliding on the flour. Behind me, Gregory groaned, trying to rise. My father's roar followed me, echoing down the hall. I ran toward the front door, heart pounding, clutching the single tape like it was life itself. Midnight wasn't over yet. Midnight was only beginning. I stumbled into the hallway, my lungs burning as if I'd been running for miles. The single tape I had snatched from the kitchen pressed against my chest like a heartbeat. The old house seemed to shrink around me, its walls closing in with the weight of decades of secrets. Behind me, my father's boots thundered against the floorboards, each step closer, heavier, angrier. Gregory's groans drifted faintly from the kitchen, proof that he was still alive but too weak to help. I had only myself now, just as my mother once had. I darted into the living room, the grandfather clock looming tall and merciless. It ticked just past 12:30 now. The mirror in the bedroom was shattered, but the message burned in my mind. "I'll come back at midnight, Nora." Midnight had come and gone. He hadn't left. He wasn't finished. My eyes landed on the small, dusty VHS player sitting beneath my grandmother's old television set. I didn't have a real projector for the tapes, but my mother had always been resourceful. I remembered her once saying she could transfer old film to new tape for safekeeping. It clicked. The single tape I was holding wasn't 8mm at all. It was a VHS she had converted before she disappeared. Hands shaking, I shoved the tape into the player and hit play. The screen flickered to life with a hiss of static. Then an image appeared. Grainy, washed-out colors of my old bedroom from 20 years ago. My mother sat at the edge of my child-sized bed, her face drawn and pale, whispering into the camera. "If you're seeing this, Nora," she said softly, "he's found you. I'm so sorry. I couldn't stop him. But I could try to leave you a path." My heart thudded. I turned up the volume. Her voice cracked with fear and resolve. "The man who comes at midnight isn't just your father. He's not the man I fell in love with. He became something else when he found what was hidden in this house. The ledger, the tapes, the key. They prove what he did at the rail yard. People vanished, Nora. Not just me. Others. He kept records of it all. He would have killed me to keep it secret, so I ran. I left you because staying meant you'd never grow up. But you're strong now. Stronger than me. You have to stop him." The picture jumped, flickered. My mother's eyes locked with the camera, burning through time. "Don't give him what he wants. Protect the evidence. When he comes at midnight, he's weakest in the light. Remember the mirror. Use it." The tape cut to black. My father's roar shattered the silence. I spun around to see him filling the doorway, his face pale with fury. "Turn it off," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "You don't know what you're seeing." But I did. For the first time that night, everything was clear. My mother hadn't been running from a lover. She had been running from a predator. The midnight visits, the chipped boots, the ledger. He had built his life on secrets and shadows, and she had tried to bring them to light. I grabbed the brass key from my pocket and held it up. "She told me to use the mirror," I said, my voice trembling but rising. "She told me to stop you." He lunged, but this time I was ready. I ducked behind the grandfather clock, yanking the old lamp cord I had strung earlier across the doorway as a last-minute trap. His boot caught it, and he stumbled, crashing to one knee. I swung the brass key on its chain, slamming it into the light switch I had left off. Every lamp in the living room blazed to life at once, their bulbs glaring like suns. My father screamed, a raw animal sound, and threw an arm over his face. His shadow warped across the walls, twisting in the bright glow. For a moment he looked smaller, frailer, like a man aging in seconds. The mirror's largest unbroken shard caught the light and reflected it, straight into his eyes. I stepped forward, holding the tape in one hand and the brass key in the other. "It's over," I said, my voice steady now. "You're not taking this from me, not anymore." He stumbled back, blinking rapidly, his breath ragged. "You don't know what you're doing," he rasped. "Those tapes, they'll destroy everything." "That's the point," I snapped. Gregory staggered into the doorway behind him, clutching his head but still upright. "Nora," he croaked, "get out, now." I took one last look at the man who had haunted my life. His eyes, my eyes, burned with rage and something else, something almost like regret. But it didn't matter anymore. The past belonged to him. The future was mine. I bolted past him, Gregory following close behind, and we burst through the back door together. The cool night air hit my face like a slap. Behind us, the house seemed to collapse inward, the lights flickering, the old walls groaning as though exhaling a secret it had held for decades. We didn't stop running until we reached Mrs. Whitaker's shop 2 blocks away. She opened the door in her robe, eyes wide at the sight of me covered in sweat and dust, holding a tape like a talisman. Without a word, she led us inside, locked the door, and pulled the blinds. For the first time all night, I felt my lungs fill with air. I had the tape. I had the proof. My mother's warnings had saved me, and my father's midnight had ended. I turned to Gregory, who sat slumped in a chair, pressing a cloth to his bleeding temple. "Are you going to tell me everything now?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "Everything," he said hoarsely. "No more secrets." I clutched the tape to my chest. My mother's voice echoed in my mind, the last words she had spoken on the recording. "You're strong now, stronger than me." She was right. I looked out the window at the dark street, the house down the block shrouded in shadow. Somewhere inside, my father still lurked, but not as the predator he once was. Midnight had stripped him of his power, and I had what he feared most, the truth. I turned back to Mrs. Whitaker's old TV. Tomorrow the police would have everything, the ledger, the tapes, my testimony. Tonight, though, I let myself breathe, and as the camera of my phone still recorded forgotten in my pocket, I whispered softly, almost like speaking to my mother through time. "I made it. I protected it. I'm not afraid anymore." The screen faded to black. Sometimes the monsters in our lives aren't strangers in the dark. They're people we once called family. This story isn't just about fear, it's about courage, about finding strength in the very moment you're supposed to break. Nora's midnight didn't end with a scream. It ended with the truth. If this story gripped you as much as it gripped me while telling it, tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Nora's place tonight? And if you want more powerful stories like this, stories of hidden truths, survival, and shocking revelations, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with someone who loves suspense as much as you do. Your support is what lets me bring these stories to life. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is face the darkness and choose not to run.